Welcome to the show. I'm Bob Irwin, your host for Fired Up. We're broadcasting from the studios of the American Guns and Glory Network here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. Fired Up can be seen, a new show every Thursday around 5 p.m., and they stay online forever. So if you miss anything, you can go back and pick it up again. It's on our website now, firedupwithbobirwin.com. The audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners Saturdays at noon throughout Nevada on the Nevada Talk Network. Questions or comments you can send to bob@firedupmail.com or leave a message on my office recorder, which is 702-257-1060. If you leave contact information, we will get back to you by email, text, or telephone. Any questions sent to our guests can be sent to that same address, and I will forward it to them if you wish. There are several hundred defensive uses of firearms each week in the United States, 200 to 300, depend on who's doing the counting. Rarely covered by the mainstream media unless they're lousy misuse of firearms murders. We always try to present a few instances of reasonable self-defense for our listeners, because they're not usually there in the media. Some are good shooting, some are questionable. Once in a while we have one that's just plain wrong, but the reason I use those particular events are they're educational to people who own firearms or carry concealed firearms. We are a nationwide show. When in a particular case, we tend to use Nevada or, when I have Don here, California law. But in other jurisdictions, the law may not apply. So understand, we're giving advice on how to stay out of jail and how not to lose a civil lawsuit. But what's a reasonable shooting in Wyoming is not a reasonable shooting in New York City, etc. The rules are different. Local rules always win. Our advice is simply designed to keep you out of jail and prevent losing the civil lawsuits, as I said. My guest today is Nevada and California firearms attorney, firearms specialist attorney, Don Green. Don, if you would, a bit of your background for somebody who hasn't tuned in before. We're picking up several hundred listeners that I wouldn't have every time. So.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Bob. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be on this show. My name is Don Green. You can find me at dongreenlaw.com. And the substantial emphasis of my practice, firearms related. Everything from representing federal firearms licensees, processing, helping people with CCWs, processing FBI appeals for people who have been denied firearms and firearms purchases. We represent people who have been denied carrying concealed weapons, and we may file a petition for judicial review in the appropriate district court. And we've been doing this for a number of years, and my total practice is 35 years. And again, if you go to dongreenlaw.com, you'll see also my 24-hour cellular, which you're welcome to call. And if I don't answer, just call back. And thank you, Bob.
All right. We're going to do a couple of cases here, and then I want to talk about some of the upcoming laws. When I had Lenny Davis on last week, we were talking about the situation we just had in Vermont, where they're now outlawing guns, basically, statewide, and that's happening several other places, and I know we talked about that. So I'm going to go through a couple of cases. I think I picked out a couple from California just because you're here. I usually try to save those for you. And,
yes, thank you.
Yeah, actually. This is from KABC TV 7 in Orange County, California. This reported was on March 30th of 2018. A homeowner shot a man who was allegedly trying to break into his Hesperia home on Thursday night. Hesperia deputies responded to reports of a burglary in progress on Ponderosa Avenue near Chestnut Street around 10:30 in the evening. Responding deputies found a 36-year-old subject suffering from a gunshot wound down in the front yard of the home. The suspect had tried to gain entry through a front window of the house. The homeowner armed himself when he heard the break-in occurring. As the suspect tried to enter the residence fired his weapon, according to police. The homeowner in this case was not hurt. The wounded suspect was taken to the hospital in critical condition. As long as you protect your family and yourself, I don't see anything wrong with it, said a neighbor who commented the homeowner is the shooter, the homeowner, is a Vietnam veteran. The neighbor said the gunshot sounded like an explosion. He went outside to see what was going on and found the intruder on the ground in front of the neighbor's home asking for help. The would-be home invader was arrested for a parole violation 2 months ago and was let out of jail 4 days prior to this event. He'll likely be back behind bars, assuming he survives, the authorities said. As for the homeowner, it appears he will not be facing charges. We're glad when any homeowner protects themselves. That's what they need to do in these situations, said Hesperias Police Lieutenant Mark Bracco. That's why you're allowed to carry a firearm in your residence. Interesting statement. It's looking at the story, what struck me immediately was it's nice the police are responding sympathetically, but I wonder about the comment that you're allowed to carry a firearm in your residence. That seems a little questionable to me.
Yes.
You're allowed to carry a firearm in your residence? Anyway, apparently the resident did not speak to the media himself, but this neighbor did. That's a nice idea. The neighbor's views won't matter in court in anybody's case, but I assume the media went after the neighbor because the shooter himself chose not to speak to the media, which is a wonderful idea. What do you think of this, Mr. Green?
Well, we'll go in reverse order. And you mentioned, and in your comments, which are well taken, I am unaware of a law in California which allows a homeowner to carry a firearm inside a residence. The California law specifically prohibits the carrying of a firearm in public unless you are a licensed law enforcement officer, certified and duly deputized deputy sheriff, or perhaps you're working security where they would allow a firearm. But I'm going to look into this point and we'll report back on our next show.
Amazing comment.
It's an amazing comment. And I'm unaware of it because although the residents, and that brings us to the main point, one of the main points is that there was a burglary in progress. And there was an attempt to gain entry through the front window. And as the suspect entered the residence, the homeowner fired his weapon. This is in Hesperia, California, which is a small community in between Victorville and Barstow on I-15. And if this case happened in Los Angeles, we don't have someone actually in the house yet. Would the Los Angeles County District Attorney prosecute the homeowner for shooting in an occupied area, in a residential area where persons may be hurt? And did he act too quickly? Because was he in fact subjected to great bodily harm or death at the moment that the suspect tried to enter the residence?
Yep.
So a smart DA in Los Angeles could very well say, it's just good, that this was like a preemptive strike, and that because the suspect was physically going through the window, could he have then at that point attacked the homeowner? He hadn't gone through yet. That's a serious question. And I think that if this happened in Los Angeles, San Diego, and definitely in San Francisco, the reverse would be happening here. There's this poor, destitute parole violator who was trying to break into a home. He wasn't in the home, and this mad dog homeowner shot him.
Yep.
That's my comment.
I understand. And what Don is reaching for here is when we tell you not to start details with the police department, because this type of case will come down to where were your feet at the moment you fired your gun? And could he have reached you reaching through the glass or not? Where were his feet? And we want footprints, and we're going to measure in literally inches between this being a valid, defensible shooting
Yes.
or one that you're going to have to hire 17 lawyers or Don Green to keep you out of jail. And of course, following that, you get the civil lawsuit about
That's right.
this poor destitute guy.
Point well taken.
He
Point
couldn't get a job because of his criminal history, so he had no choice but to try and break into houses because he was starving to death. I mean, I've heard this all 100 times in court, and Don's heard it 1,000 times. It comes to a matter of inches. So when we advise you, and Don advised you, don't make statements till you have an attorney there.
Exactly.
All you do is identify yourself. You may say, this is my house, I live here. The gun's over there in the drawer because I didn't want to have it in my hand when you came in the door. Or I still had the gun, but I put it down as soon as I saw the police because the guy was on the lawn. And of course, the guy's on the lawn. Well, how do we know you shot him when he was in the house?
Exactly.
So, well, if you
The
shot him in the
forensics will
house,
bear it
why
out.
isn't there a blood trail?
Right.
Well, because it rained, it was raining and there is no blood. But honestly, he was standing right here. Leave the details alone when the police are there. I spent 24 years in police service. Trust me, the guy who arrives at the crime scene doesn't give a hoot whether you were right or wrong. He just wants to put up his crime scene tape. Take the time to think, relax, look at the situation, have an attorney there before you make a statement. If you want a public defender, they'll give you one. And you know what the public defender is going to say to you on the phone? Don't say anything until I get there. Because they've all seen this 100 times. You
Yes,
say something
absolutely.
that just is so innocent and it puts your ass in jail over it.
That's right.
Shut up.
Point well taken, Bob.
This is from, we're gonna get into politics now because that's, what I kind of led in when I was talking to Lenny last week. A couple of stories come to mind. I'm going to lead in with a couple of them, and then you can take this where you want it to go. Or do you want to start out just talking about what's going on in D.C., or shall I run
Let's
the
go
stories
through,
first?
we can go through your outline.
This
There's
is
some good
from-
points here.
Well, of course. This is from a website called bearingarms.com, which I subscribe to, reported on the 11th, which is yesterday. Anne Finucane, Bank of America's vice chairman, said Tuesday in an interview on Bloomberg TV that the bank has notified a handful of gun manufacturers it does business with about their decision. Their decision is that Bank of America will no longer lend money to companies that manufacture military-style assault weapons for civilian use in the hopes that they will contribute to a reduction in the number of mass shootings nationwide. So if you want to borrow from B of A and open up an AR parts factory,
You're out of luck.
you're out of luck. They said, this is quoting her, "We want to contribute in any way we can to reduce these mass shootings. It's such a tragedy in the United States," she said. "We do have a few manufacturers of military-style firearms. We will let them know that it is not our intent to underwrite or finance military-style firearms on a go-forward basis. Whether the bank would also stop doing business with retailers that sell assault weapons," she said, "that would involve complicated issues related to civil liberties." No kidding. "And the Second Amendment. It's good public dialogue is a way to start this off," she said. "Reaction from gun manufacturers that do business with B of A is mixed," she said. Let's just leave it at that. The decision, she says, is not likely to have much of an impact on Bank of America's bottom line since there aren't many manufacturers of military-style firearms nationally, said a banking consultant. Well, maybe it will if there's if businesses like this are taking sides in this great gun debate, and if you think that failing to loan money to somebody because they make magazines or AR parts or gun parts in general be sure to tell B of A that when you close your account. I don't expect they'll care. They got billions and billions of dollars. I've locked horns with B of A a few times. Some of my people
Yes.
personally know. But they've always been very courteous when they're stomping your head in, you know,
Right.
with 5,000 lawyers. But maybe it won't hurt their bottom line, but it'll hurt your bottom line if you do business with them. So maybe you want to march down to B of A and find another bank you like to put your money at.
May I add one little legal point on this
Sure.
issue on Bank of America? A chief United States District Judge in Washington, D.C., on May 22nd, 2017, issued or signed off on a search warrant for 8 banks, including Wells Fargo and Bank of America. They were there to seize over $700 million of North Korea's money, which was being used for weapons development and manufacturing. I do not know of these little mom and pop manufacturers of AR parts, or perhaps even maybe Colt or Barrett or Daniel Defense, DPMS Panther. I don't know if they're making $700 million, but that money was seized and taken out of Bank of America's coffers. And for them to say, they're hypocrites, for them to say that we don't want to contribute to this tragedy in mass shootings. What about the weapons of mass destruction and weapons development, which can be bought for $700 million with North Korea just forking over the cash?
We clearly have a large major bank in the United States that doesn't give a hoot about the Second Amendment or the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. I just found this. It didn't surprise me with B of A, but it will surprise a lot of other people, I think, that they did that. In the same vein, the Second Amendment Foundation, which is a very strong pro-gun group, if you're not familiar with them, you can find their website, Second Amendment Foundation, today filed a lawsuit against the Chicago suburb of Deerfield, Illinois, seeking an injunction against enforcement of the ban on so-called assault weapons and large capacity magazine that was adopted by the Village Board of Trustees earlier this week. Joining Second Amendment Foundation in the legal challenge is the Illinois State Rifle and Pistol Association and a private citizen, Daniel Easterday, who resides in the village and is a gun owner. The lawsuit was filed in the 19th Judicial Circuit Court in Lake County. Plaintiffs are represented by Glenn Ellen and attorney David Segal. The lawsuit challenges the village ban under a 2013 amended state statute that declared the regulation and possession or ownership of assault weapons are exclusive powers and functions of the state. Any ordinance or regulation or portion of that ordinance or regulation that purports to regulate possession or ownership of assault weapons in a manner is inconsistent with this act and shall be invalid. But this village has decided on its own. We have the same preemption law in Nevada, most states do, that say gun laws are the purview of the state legislature, not the individual cities and towns and so forth. Anyway, this little hamlet is outlawing assault weapons defined as God knows what. It's interesting, they outlaw actual assault weapons that legal machine gun owners have.
Yes.
What do we do then? Anyway, we move swiftly to challenge this gun ban because it flies in the face of state law, said SAF founder and executive president Alan Gottlieb. While the village is trying to disguise this as an amendment to an existing ordinance, it is in fact a new law that entirely bans possession of legally owned semi-automatic firearms, with no exception for guns previously owned or any provision for self-defense. The new ordinance also provides for confiscation and destruction of such firearms and their original capacity magazines. What is particularly outrageous is this new law is it levies a fine of $1,000 a day against anyone who refuses to turn in their gun and magazines or move them out of the village by the time the ordinance takes effect in
Absolutely.
June. It certainly puts lie to the claim that anti-gunners use all the time that say, nobody's coming to take your gun. They are coming to take your guns. The left side of this argument is moving strongly in the states to topple states one at a time. They've gone through several states. We've talked about a couple of them on today's show, one on yesterday's show or last week's show. And there are others coming up. I've got a stack of these at home, and I'm trying to run a show and talk about, you know, this little hamlet did this and this hamlet did that. When we're in a Nevada show, Nevada's looking at the same thing. We've got there's the political part of guns, politics, and self-defense. We've got two Democrats running for governor in this state. One is Steve Sisolak. I misspelled his name. Steve, I spelled wrong on the outline. My proofreader's having her nails done today. One is Steve Sisolak, who's a current county commissioner. He's running for governor. And Chris Giunciliani, who is also a county commissioner. They are trying to one-up each other on who's the most anti-gun and magazine person that's running on the left side. They are each one trying to outstep the other one, where Sisolak will say something like, we got to register all these assault weapons, and Giuliani comes back and says, that won't do any good. They can still kill people. We got to pick them all up. Obviously, that flies in the face of our state laws here also. We have a right to keep and bear arms in Nevada. Whether they can really do that or not, I don't know, but it'll be annoying for them to try. I'm encouraging local voters, if you're in the state of Nevada, to vote for Adam Laxalt. He is a true Second Amendment constitutional conservative. He originally wrote the opinion that the FBI cannot be ordered around by our writing a bill that says, you know, a law that says you have to do a background check for all sales, which the FBI promptly refused to do because the state can't order the FBI to do something. He's legally right on that. And Sisolak and Giuliani are yelling that Laxalt should have enforced that. So what he's supposed to do? He's supposed to go to Washington and slap the FBI around until they agree to do background checks?
Right. They're ignorant of the law. They're ignorant of the FBI's procedures in background checks, which specifically in Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations, the FBI's hands are tied because the Code of Federal Regulations specifically says that the FBI cannot give the background information to someone who is not authorized to receive that, and an entity which is authorized to receive that has to be a law enforcement entity such as the Nevada Department of Public Safety, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, when we used to have gun registration.
Yep.
So, and that brings us up to the next point, and that is that what Commissioner Sisolak and Giuliani want to do is they want to undercut Nevada's constitutional provision on the right to keep and bear arms for defense, sporting purposes, and other purposes. It is very specific. In my practice, I have never used the Second Amendment. We use the Nevada constitutional provision and the Nevada revised statutes because they are much more clearer. And our law in Nevada, although it's sparse on weapons, it is very clear that the Nevada Supreme Court is interpreting these laws as they should be. That you do, if you are truly a citizen, as defined in a case in 2012, and that was where a felon tried to possess a musket-type weapon, a black powder-type rifle up in either Esmeralda County or Mineral County, but it went to the Nevada Supreme Court, and Nevada Supreme Court said that although it says that all citizens may possess firearms, two questions. One, he's no longer a citizen because he's a felon. That takes away certain civil liberties. Second, the fact that it's a musket, and there's an ATF regulation which says that you can possess a black powder type rifle or pistol so long as it's not capable of chambering cartridge ammunition, or weapons which were produced, prior to 1896?
Yeah, something like that.
Although, and then comma, subject to state law. Now, the 2013 amended state statute in Illinois, we need something like that in Nevada. Now, the liberals are going to try to challenge that, but this law makes it abundantly clear on assault rifles. And then this $1,000 a day, that's criminal. And it does not bear a reasonable or rational relation to the intended purpose of the law. And it chills, in this case, a Second Amendment right or whatever limited rights there are in Illinois. So I believe that this group of people are just grandstanding. And
Well, they are. They can't actually do this.
No.
But it's good for the conservatives because they're splitting the. Only one of them's going to end up in the general election because they're going to chew each other up and chew up their own money. Sisolak has a ton of money to run for office. He's been planning this for years and years. He's got $3 million something in the bank. For Nevada, there's like 11 people live here. You know, this is not like, but it's a big issue for Nevada. We got Dean Heller running. We got Danny Karkanian running for a congressional seat, et cetera. We got some really pro-gun folks running. But this election, Nevada is a key state. I mean, we're fighting over, it's a key state for both parties. They believe the governorship, the Democrats believe they can win it. The Democrats believe they can win the Senate seat. They believe they can win a couple at least, of the congressional seats that we've got up for election. They're running really well-funded candidates. June Kiliani for governor got a huge grant from some progressive alliance in D.C. that has poured millions of dollars into her campaign, I understand, because she is further to the right, or farther to the left than Sisolak is. And as I say, they're slugging it out to prove who's more anti-gun. Mm-hmm. I say, hopefully they chew each other up in the primary, but it is so important. If you own a gun and you want to be able to keep your gun, at least keep it in your house with 11 shots in the magazine to defend your home against criminals who aren't planning to turn their guns in, you need to vote, and you can vote twice. All you got to do is find another conservative who isn't planning to vote and drive them to the polls. So they'll vote too, right? Then you get 2 votes and it's legal. So you can find somebody and double your vote. We're working on it. I've got another story here on Massachusetts. They're doing the same thing. We'll get into that one probably next time we're on. Same thing is happening in Massachusetts with a gun law that is about to do the same thing to keep Massachusetts safe from gun violence, taking guns away from honest citizens who aren't shooting anybody at the moment. They're really working on this state by state. The federal thing is obviously the most dangerous to us because there's no place to go if the federal law passes. That's the bigger deal. We're going to, next time Don's on, we'll have a lot more details about what is proposed and likely to pass in Congress, especially when we see who's going to win the election in November. Mm-hmm. The shows are on our website, www.firedupwithboberwin.com. All the current shows are on there. We're adding the old shows as I speak to that in a separate section on previous shows. Commercials keep us on the air. Capitalism wins every time. So support our sponsors if you can. And we'll be back next week, and we will go on with more of this. As this gets closer to the election, I've had a congressional candidate scheduled today, and I had to cancel him because I just haven't got the time to give him enough time on the air. But we've got some candidates coming on, and we will have an endorsement list up on the website within about 2 weeks for the upcoming June primaries. So watch for that. Thanks for listening. Don, thanks for being here
Thank
one
you
more
so much.
time.
Always an honor.
We'll be at the gun show this coming weekend.
That's this weekend.
Yeah.
Crossroads of the West, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
actually,
Crossroads of the West.
yeah, it's last weekend because this show is going on after. This is next week.
Oh, okay. All right.
But we will be there this coming weekend, but bear in mind we're talking to you a week early now. We announced it on last week's show, which was
Okay.
on already. This week's show. This is next week's show.
Oh, all right.
That's why I'm going stark raving mad.
Okay.
We should tape these shows 2 or 3 at a time. Thanks for listening very much, and register to vote. Have a good evening.